if you can't learn how to get out of that victim mentality, you're always going to stay there. It doesn't matter whether you're 18, you're 16, you're 15. I think it all goes back to how do you view life. And I think for us, we've always seen life from a growth mindset. We're always like, life doesn't happen to us, life happens for us. So we're always trying to figure out like, what's the solution? What can we solve? What can we do? And I think that's the biggest thing that we have had to learn with overcoming challenges, is that you can go back to that old mindset you had at the beginning of always being a victim, or you can look at it from like the growth mindset of like, what is this teaching me? Hello you guys, and welcome back. My name is Jasmine.
My name is Matthew Cole.
And this is the 1% Better Everyday podcast. So first, we just want to say thank you guys so much for sticking with us for 29 episodes. We literally wouldn't have this platform if it wasn't for you guys. So we kind of already recorded once and we got to start over, but we were getting into the story of how the podcast even started. Are you a service-based entrepreneur that provides some kind of service, but you don't know how to create content in order to convert someone from following you into a paying client? I'm going to tell you exactly what to post in order to start generating more leads, attract high-paying clients, and get more DMs than you can possibly answer. I will help you how to find your niche, how to find your target audience, and craft offers that will attract top buyers every time you go to make a post. Text me content to 513-516-7332 to learn more on how you can get mentored by me for only $99 a month. Which, at the beginning I was doing interviews with business owners and, just people that wanted to get into entrepreneurship, but I didn't really know where the podcast was going. And then, one day we kind of figured, I'm like, why not make this space into a space where we can talk about entrepreneurship, business, and life and everything in between. So at the beginning of every episode, we always like to shout one of you guys out. And for today's episode, we want to go ahead and shout out Ryan Vers Burgess 5337 on Instagram. He said, "Keep up the great work, bro, changing the world." And
that wasn't on Instagram, that was on YouTube.
Oh, was it on YouTube?
Yeah.
But something that you said last week that I think stuck with me was at the beginning of business, we were so excited to just impact one person or just change one person's life or just help one person with their business. And I think that nowadays, and I don't want to say nowadays, but I think that on your journey with entrepreneurship, like the busier and busier you get, you forget about the power of one. And I'm so glad that you said that, because sometimes we think that our platform doesn't reach enough people, or we think that we don't get enough likes or enough followers, or we want more and more and more reach and more engagement, and we want things to go viral, but we don't realize how we're impacting one person every time we show up. So today we wanted to talk about overcoming challenges and resiliency, because I think we have so much to talk about on this topic, but let's get right into it. So I know we really wanted to get into this topic because I know in entrepreneurship and even in life, sometimes it can get really hard. And it's like, how do you keep going during those moments when it gets like super, super tough, like where you want to quit?
It's discipline. I just made a YouTube video about that, motivation versus discipline. And I'll even bring it up an example of us doing our podcast episode. We just simply, our challenge was putting out content and being consistent. And then all we needed to do was just come up with a plan on how we were able to do that and actually stick to it, which was the discipline part. Like, if you don't have you can be motivated all day. Like we love doing this. We were motivated by it, but without the actual action of the discipline, then we wouldn't have made it this far to 29 episodes. So
That's so true. And with anything in life, whether you want to grow a podcast, whether you want to, stay disciplined with your fitness goals, whether you want to be a better mom, a better dad, everything requires discipline. And I think sometimes we are so easy to bring up our excuses, or we're like, we don't have the time, or we're tired, or we're this or that. But I think that everything in life requires discipline. So even when it gets really, really hard, something that I always tell my family, and my family kind of gets on me because they're always like, oh, like, you're kind of like the mom sometimes in those situations. But I think that, being the oldest in my family, it kind of puts you in a position where you have to figure it out. There's no other way than for you to figure it out. And I think sometimes when you're forced into those situations, or you're forced into making those decisions, it forces you to kind of take a risk and just go with it, and you'll figure it out as you go. And sometimes it's going to get really hard and you just have to keep going too. But going back to what you said, to discipline.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, Matt, I need your help growing my social media audience.
All right, guys, if you need help growing your social media audience, make sure you text 602-390-7002. Once again, it's 602-390-7002.
Nowadays, because we get everything so fast with instant gratification, it's so easy for us to forget that everything goes through a journey. Not everything comes overnight. And I think most people forget that. And that's something that we talked about in another episode with social media. Like, people don't see the ups and downs that you go through in order to get to one place.
And that's how you simply overcome those challenges, is by just remaining disciplined. You don't even have to be a business owner or entrepreneur to have challenges in your life to overcome. It can be anything from, especially at a young age, like, especially for you learning Spanish and English at the same time, us navigating, going to school and being without our parents, we've been overcoming challenges for so long that we don't even really realize all the shit that us living and breathing and getting from point A to point B, like coming home safely, like that's a challenge that we overcome every single day.
Yeah, and then that's such a good topic that you're actually bringing up, and I think that it goes back to, I forget what it's called, but it's like the growth versus stagnant mindset, where it's like, I don't know what the other word is. I can't think of it at the top of my head, but it's like, you can stay in that victim mentality mindset where it's like every single time you get a challenge, you can be like, poor me, like I'm never gonna get out of this situation, or like, life just doesn't happen like this for people like me. Because I remember when I used to have those thoughts, and I used to be that person for a long time, especially when I was like 18 through 22. And it was because I was going through a lot of like learning phases, and not to say that that's an excuse to stay there, but if you can't learn how to get out of that victim mentality, you're always going to stay there. It doesn't matter whether you're 18, you're 16, you're 15. I think it all goes back to, how do you view life? And I think for us, we've always seen life from a growth mindset. We're always like, life doesn't happen to us, life happens for us. So we're always trying to figure out, like, what's the solution? What can we solve? What can we do? And I think that's the biggest thing that we have had to learn with overcoming challenges, is that you can go back to that old mindset you had at the beginning of always being a victim, or you can look at it from like the growth mindset of like, what is this teaching me?
When did you realize that, or at what point do you realize that you're being challenged?
That's such a good question. I think that I know I'm being challenged when something feels uncomfortable. And you usually know when something feels uncomfortable when, one, it's bringing up feelings and emotions that maybe you haven't experienced before, or maybe you have experienced them before, and obviously they don't make you feel comfortable. Like, it feels like you almost want to fight against it. I know for me personally, every time I've felt uncomfortable, it's usually because I'm either learning something new, I feel like I can't do the new thing, or at least my mind wants to trick me into me believing that I can't do it, or me thinking that it's going to be hard, when sometimes the situation that's being thrown at you is actually not hard. It just seems challenging because you've never gone through it.
Yeah, uncomfortable when you're. But I'm also, I don't know, I'm just a different human being, because I like to be uncomfortable, because that's when I learn what growth is. But I'm not like everybody else, and everybody else is not like me, and people need to understand that in order to overcome challenges, you are going to have to go through an uncomfortable point in your life in order to achieve that goal that you're trying to reach.
Yeah, and I want to get into like what resiliency even means, because I know for a lot of some people don't know what resiliency means, but I don't think that resiliency is pushing through at all costs. And if you guys see me looking down, it's because I have notes, but it's about adapting to the power of perspective. So I think that's like the common misconception, is that when people think like resiliency, they think like, oh, you just got to push through and get through anything. But again, we talked about that mindset. It's like, can you adapt to the situation that's being thrown at you? Like, sometimes you won't like the situations that you're being thrown in, and they're really uncomfortable, but are you going to like ride the situation out just to ride it out? Or again, Like, are you going to look at it as a way of like what can this teach me? And I know I'm kind of repeating myself, but that's the most important thing when it comes to anything in life or anything in business, because it doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur. You know, one day life will throw things at you that you can't control, and you have to learn how to control your mindset or control your perspective, because that's the only thing you can control at the end of the day. But going into that, like, I know we've talked about this before, where I feel like you've always had and to me, it seems like you've always had like a positive mindset about everything. You're always like, oh, let me find a way out, or like, let me find a solution. And I feel like I was always like that, but sometimes I wouldn't express it too much, because sometimes like when you're too positive, people don't like that. Or when you're too optimistic, people don't like that. So for you, like, do you feel like that was something that you always grew up with, or you grew into it?
I feel like I've always been like that because I've in the past 2 years I've been told that I was a lone wolf multiple times, but I understand why, because not everybody thinks like me. So when you don't think like me, I kind of separate myself from people because they're not thinking like me. So it's like, it's always been like that, because I'm always looking to get something done and to have fun and to do the shit that I want to do. Like, I'm not afraid to actually act on the visions that I have in my head. So it's always been like that.
Yeah, and going back to that, I think one of the things that I just learned through like the last 2 years and working with different brands and working with different people is that you're not meant to be liked by everyone. And I think that that's like even like another, you know, just challenge that we've had to overcome in business, not only in business but in life. And that's like a hard thing that I had to learn later on when I was a little bit older, in my 20s, where, you know, I feel like for so long when I was younger, I was always the person that, you know, I just wanted everyone to be friends, and, you know, everything is rainbows and sunshine. And, you know, I remember when I first started dating you, and you were like, it doesn't always work like that. Like, you know, some people just don't want to have a better life. Some people don't want to look at things like from a better lens, or some people.
Which makes me a lone wolf, because I don't hang around people that don't think like me. And it's really, 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 really hard to find people that think like you. Like,
Yeah.
And I'm not saying like I'm better than everybody, but I just know that the goals that I want to achieve in the area that I'm in my life, it's really hard to come by people that are like as like-minded as me.
Yeah. And going back to your point, like, again, it doesn't mean that when you think differently or when you think a different way, it doesn't make you better than other people. But I think that, again, going back to that adapting, it's like, are you adaptive to how other people think differently around you? And I think for so long we were in an environment where it was kind of pushed, like you had to think a certain way, because if you don't think a certain way, like you're wrong or you're crazy or you're weird or you're like the lone wolf. And I don't think that's always the case. I think, you know, going back to like faith a little bit, because we talk about that on this podcast, it's like God created everyone differently for a reason. So if we all thought the same way, like how boring would that be? So it's, you know, it's people think differently for a reason, and there's beauty in that. And I think as a creator, you should push other people to think differently than you, because they can bring different perspectives.
Yeah, and that's going to happen too. That's another challenge you're going to have to overcome being a solopreneur or entrepreneur, is being in rooms with people that all think the same when you observantly think outside the box. And that's something that you're going to have to deal with too. Whether you're working in that capacity, working outside the capacity, or just simply attracting the people that work like or think like you, that is a challenge that you will have to overcome. And how you overcome that challenge is basically simply what I told you at the beginning of this video, is just keep doing and loving what you want to do and being unapologetically doing it, and continue to be consistent about it, because what's going to happen is you're going to attract the people that's doing the same shit as you.
And I think one of the key things that you said was like always having that problem solving mentality, because we've met a lot of people that, again, this is not to say that they're bad people or that they're doing things wrong, but people limit themselves sometimes by not finding that solution. It's like people want
Instead of
to
complain, they just complain instead of problem solve. Yeah.
people want to focus on the problem so much
And not the
that
solutions.
they forget, like, you can use the same energy to create a solution. And it goes back to that victim mentality mindset where, I mean, there's so many ways that you can break it down, but you can't call yourself a positive person when every single time you have a challenge you're complaining about it.
Yeah.
Like, and I know we repeat this a lot through this podcast, but a lot of the things that I feel like sometimes we go through, like, we can control a lot, and I know there's some things that we can't control, but a lot of the times I feel like we kind of get ourselves in the situations that we end up being in because of our choices and our decisions.
And what challenges you decide to overcome, and what challenges you just lay it on me. I just want to sit here and deal with it. Like, that's going to determine, based on what challenges the universe provides to you, is going to, based on whether you face it or not, is going to dictate how your life go. Like, that's a super, super big part of people's perception too, and the problems that come in their life. Some people sit in their problems and some people overcome their problems. Which person are you going to be?
Yeah. And going back to that, I think one of the things that I recently realized that is so important to have in life is emotional intelligence, because so many people do not have emotional intelligence. And again, I don't say that as a bad thing of like, oh, we're so much better than other people. But I think that when you get to a certain age, or at least like I would think that when you got to your 20s, like, you start to think about those things a little bit more. Like, you start to think about like, hey, how am I reacting to certain situations, and how is it impacting other people around me? Because I think that for me, I've always been empathetic to how people react and respond to things that I do on a daily basis. But I just didn't realize until this year how many people lack that emotional regulation, and how many people can't even control their emotions or feelings.
Well, it's one thing that I used to tell you all the time last year, 2024, all of 2024. Especially at the beginning of the year, I used to say, just because you react and do and treat people a certain way, don't expect other people to do that exact same thing. I used to tell that to you all the time, because we understood the environment we was in and what type of things that we were doing for people. But again, my expectation to her was that just because we're good people and we're doing the right thing and showing up 110% doesn't mean the people around us is going to do the same thing.
Yeah, that's so true. And I want to end it off with this, because I know we have to get into the hot topic, but also don't be afraid to ask for help. Like, don't be afraid to ask for support, because I think that was another big lesson that I had to learn.
Don't be afraid to ask for money either.
Yeah, that was that should be another episode.
Yeah.
But that was another big lesson that I had to learn, is I think that, again, the reason I always talk about my story is because I went to school for psychology. So I really do feel like a lot of the things that you experience in your adulthood is from your childhood. So that's why I always reference back my story of I was the oldest. And I think that being the oldest for so long put me in a position where I was the one that was supposed to figure it out. I couldn't really ask anybody for help because nobody knew better decisions than I did. And so as I got older, as being an entrepreneur, and even in life where I had to figure things out, and you would always ask me, like, did you ask somebody? Like, did you ask for help? And I was like, oh, well, that didn't even come to my mind. And so that was something that I had to learn, is that it's okay to ask for help sometimes when you don't know the answer. Like, it's okay to ask for help sometime when you need help, and sometimes you just don't even want to do a task. Like,
you know where I got that from?
Where?
RIP my mom. My mom used to, and that's crazy because we about to story time real quick. Before I used to leave the house, before I went anywhere, before I did anything, my mom would ask 3 to 5 questions. And me growing up as a kid, and because this relates to sales and communication completely, me growing up as a kid, I was annoyed at it. Like, man, why is she asking me so many questions? Like, why I gotta answer this? And then, of course, me and a parent reciprocated that same thing. But it's so important to ask questions and be understanding of other people before we lay judgment and assume things that's going on. And again, that's another way to overcome a challenge of dealing with people in general, is just ask questions. That's all you gotta do, is ask. People will start spilling stuff out. People start talking their fucking head off if you ask somebody 2 or 3 critical questions that make them think, and they'll just start yapping off. But it also helps you build communication and build relationships as well too by simply asking questions.
That's so true. Do you want to share what she asked you?
Shit. I remember one time I was going to my friend's house. She was like, I distinctly remember her saying this. Do I know them? Do I know those kids? Do I know their parents? Where they stay at? And how long you going to be over there for? Like, that was probably her usual questions. And not knowing, like, those are all, like, super duper very important questions, too, because any parent, when you got a child going out to anywhere, you would immediately want to know those questions. If you're a parent that don't ask those questions, or if you are a sales rep or business owner that don't ask qualifying questions, you're missing key points when it comes to getting to know somebody.
That was a bar.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into the hot topic, you guys. So at the end of every single episode, we always leave 5 to 10 minutes to talk about a hot topic. This means like this is something that somebody in the community is dealing with, and we just want to give them our advice or what we would do. So for this one is about building resilience, the key to overcoming adversity. Somebody said, life's been throwing me some curveballs, and I realized the key to bouncing back is resilience. It's not about avoiding tough times, but how you handle them, right? I've been digging into this concept lately, and I wanted to share some thoughts. First off, resilience isn't about being tough all the time. It's about being flexible like bamboo in the wind. I found that embracing setbacks as opportunities for growth has been a game changer instead of dwelling on negatives. I've been focusing on what I can learn from every situation. One thing that's helped me build resilience is cultivating a strong support system. Having friends and family to lean on when things get tough makes all the difference. Plus, surrounding yourself with positive influences can help you keep a sunny outlook when it feels like the world's against you. So what about you? How do you stay resilient in the face of adversity?
Being my biggest cheerleader. I love whoever said that, which was cool and stuff like that. But the only thing I don't agree with is the people, building the people around you to make sure they're your support system. You should be your number one support system at the end of the day, because something could happen to the people around you. Like somebody could fold, somebody can fall out of love with you, somebody can stop supporting you. So the most important thing is to have faith and to believe in you and to be your biggest cheerleader. Yeah. That's how I build resilience.
Yeah, I would agree. Just because I think that, getting into story time again, I think that, just being so tight-knit to my family, like my family and my friends were everything when I was growing up, especially my family, like it was my support system. And as I've gotten a little older, I've just realized that sometimes family won't always be the number one person that's happy for you. They won't always be the one, like the person that's clapping for you, unfortunately. Or understanding. Yeah, and going back to what you said, I think that you have to be your biggest cheerleader, because if you're always depending on other people to be happy for you, then you're always looking for some kind of outside validation. And that was something that I had to learn the hard way, is that at the end of the day, you have to be your biggest cheerleader.
You should validate your own self. You should be your top validator too. And that's why we are able to overcome challenges, because we are our biggest cheerleader. We push our own selves. We don't wait for somebody else to push us to make a decision. And without having that internal push to do stuff, you'll never get over it, especially when you don't have a supporting cast.
That's so true. And that's a whole nother episode we can get into, because I know so many people kind of wait until their partner supports them, their friends or family, or tells them or gives them validation that it's a good business idea, or it's a good idea to go for it, or don't get me started on like how so many Latino parents think that college is like the way out, and a lot of kids, end up disappointed that their parents don't agree with them not going to college. And that's a whole nother conversation, but it's the same thing. You're always going to be looking for like validation from somebody. So I think that if you can start that when you're younger and just always validate yourself first, I know it's harder said than done, then you will be prepared for later on when something happens, knock on wood that doesn't happen for you, but you just never know how people might change one day. So that is the end of today's episode, for episode 29. Again, thank you guys so much for being here every step of the way. And at the end of every episode, we actually like to shout out how you guys can get more support from us. So you guys can join our SKOOL or Social Strategy Society down below. It is our monthly mentorship where you guys can join for $99 a month. We have weekly coaching calls and you guys get access to a bunch of resources, especially if you're an entrepreneur, solopreneur, freelancer, and want to build your brand. That's the perfect place for you guys to be at and get more help from us. But without further ado, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you guys in the next episode. Bye, you guys.
Peace.